You're watching Daily Topics. If this your first time, please subscribe. Like and comment on this video. Now let's delve into today's topic. Russia's involvement in Burkina Faso, particularly in support of Captain Ibrahim Traore, is deeply rooted in a complex blend of geopolitical strategy, anti-Western sentiment, economic interests, and a reshaping of alliances in the Sahel region. Here's a deep breakdown of why Russia sent troops, or more accurately, security forces and private military contractors, to protect Traore and solidify their partnership. Traore's rise and anti-Western shift. Captain Ibrahim Traore seized power in a coup in September 2022, toppling Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Damiba. Traore capitalized on widespread frustration over the government's inability to contain jihadist insurgencies. He presented himself as a Pan-African, anti-imperialist figure and quickly moved to distance Burkina Faso from France, the former colonial power. France's decline. Traore expelled French troops and suspended military agreements with France. This created a security vacuum. Need for new allies. With jihadist groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda affiliates gaining ground, Traore needed a capable security partner. Russia filling the vacuum. Wagner and geopolitical opportunism. As Traore broke ties with France, Russia, through the Wagner Group, now operating as Africa Corps, stepped in to fill the security and political vacuum. Russia's deployment was not necessarily through official troops, but through well-trained private contractors acting with Kremlin approval. Security for regime survival. Wagner operatives reportedly provided personal protection for Traore, trained local forces, and guarded key installations. Russia's playbook. Similar to its approach in the Central African Republic and Mali, Russia offers protection, military training, and counterinsurgency support in exchange for influence and access to resources. Strategic positioning in the Sahel. Burkina Faso is part of a wider Russian strategy to build influence across West Africa, particularly in states that have turned against France and the West. Alongside Mali and Niger, Burkina Faso is part of the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, a new bloc hostile to ecowas and Western intervention. Geopolitical corridor. Russia is effectively building a security corridor from the Central African Republic through Mali and Burkina Faso to potentially other parts of West Africa. Countering NATO influence. This is also a soft pushback against NATO-aligned Western countries that support Ukraine. Economic interests. Gold, uranium, and natural resources. Burkina Faso is rich in gold, a key target for Wagner and Russian interests. Resource for security model. Russia reportedly secures mining concessions or access to mineral wealth in exchange for security services. This model has worked in the Central African Republic and is being replicated in Burkina Faso. Sanctions evasion. Gold and other mineral exports can be used to bypass Western sanctions and help fund Russian operations abroad. Soft power and ideological alignment. Traore has embraced anti-colonial rhetoric and Pan-Africanism, often echoing Russian propaganda lines. This ideological alignment strengthens Russia's position as an ally of liberated Africa, fighting back against imperialist forces. Information warfare. Russian-backed media outlets and social media campaigns promote Traore as a revolutionary hero, while framing France and the US as exploitative and destabilizing. Russia sent military support, primarily through private contractors, to protect Ibrahim Traore for a mix of strategic, ideological, and economic reasons. To expand its influence in a geopolitically important region. To displace Western powers, particularly France. To gain access to valuable mineral resources. To promote a new Pan-African order with Russian backing. And to ensure that allies like Traore stay in power and provide Moscow with long-term leverage in West Africa. Economic benefits for Russia. Access to gold and strategic minerals. Burkina Faso is Africa's fourth largest gold producer. With over 17 industrial mines and dozens of artisanal ones, its gold reserves are immense. Gold for security deals. Russia, especially through Wagner/Africa Corps, is believed to have secured direct or indirect control over artisanal mining sites. Revenue stream. These gold flows can be used to circumvent Western financial systems, either through off-the-book sales or smuggling routes, helping Russia sustain its economy and war effort in Ukraine. Potential uranium interest. While Niger has more developed uranium mines, Burkina Faso is believed to have untapped deposits. Securing exploration rights early gives Russia long-term leverage. Infrastructure and construction contracts. As part of its expansion model, Russia encourages African states to grant construction, energy, and infrastructure contracts to Russian firms. State-run companies, entities like Rosatom, nuclear energy, and Russian railways often follow behind military support to win government-backed contracts. Soft economic colonization. These deals often come with little transparency, locking the host country into long-term dependency on Russian firms. Economic benefits for Burkina Faso. Military support without Western conditions. Burkina Faso, under Traoré, has turned to Russia partly because Russian military support comes without governance strings attached. No democracy clauses. Unlike the West, Russia does not demand elections, press freedom, or human rights reforms in exchange for aid. Efficient counterinsurgency help. Russian mercenaries are battle-hardened and feared. Their presence boosts the regime's capacity to fight jihadists in areas where the national army is weak. Direct investment and resource control. Russia's involvement allows Burkina Faso to retain greater control over its mining sector, compared to French or Western companies that often dominate extraction and repatriate most profits. Nationalization potential. With Russian backing, Traoré has hinted at plans to nationalize parts of the mining industry or renegotiate contracts on more favorable terms. Revenue retention. This potentially increases state revenue, which Traoré can use for popular programs, earning him support from the rural poor and urban youth. Political benefits for Russia. Expansion of influence in Francophone Africa. Russia's involvement in Burkina Faso forms part of a wider plan to undermine French and Western influence in Africa, especially in former French colonies. Alliance with military regimes. Russia is forming a bloc of aligned regimes, Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, that are hostile to France and the US. Geopolitical footprint. By embedding military assets and advisors in these countries, Russia creates outposts for intelligence, surveillance, and soft power projection across West Africa. Narrative war and soft power. Russia's success in Burkina Faso helps it push the multipolar world narrative, a rejection of Western global dominance. Information dominance. Russian media, like RT and Sputnik, and social media influencers in Africa portray Russia as a friend of Africa's sovereignty, building goodwill among youth and anti-imperialists. Cultural exchanges, military academies, Russian language programs, and student scholarships further embed Russian presence. Political benefits for Burkina Faso. Regime survival. Captain Traoré is under constant threat from insurgent groups and internal rivals. Russian security support ensures protection of the presidency. Reports indicate that Russian operatives are embedded in presidential security details. Counter-coup deterrence. The presence of Russian forces acts as a warning to potential challengers within the military. Sovereignty and regional leadership. Traoré is positioning himself as the voice of a new Pan-African movement, anti-Western, self-determined, and sovereign. Symbolic independence. Breaking from France and inviting Russia is seen as reclaiming agency. Regional bloc building. With Mali and Niger, Traoré leads the AES alliance, challenging ECOWAS and pushing for a West Africa free from neocolonialism. Why all Africans must support the rise of a sovereign, united, and powerful Africa. 1. Because Africa has been the engine of the world's wealth, but not its own. For centuries, Africa has been the source of raw materials that built European empires, powered industrial revolutions, and now feed modern technologies. Colonial exploitation. Gold from Ghana, uranium from Niger, oil from Nigeria, and cobalt from Congo have fueled Western and now Chinese economies. Continued neocolonialism. Despite independence, most African countries still operate under economic systems and trade agreements designed in Europe. Resources are extracted cheaply, refined abroad, and sold back to Africans at inflated prices. This must change. Africans must reclaim ownership over their natural wealth and demand value addition on African soil, jobs for Africans, industries in Africa, and revenue staying home. 2. Because true freedom means sovereign control over security, policy, and alliances. Countries like Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger are showing that real independence isn't just about flags and anthems. It's about having the freedom to decide who protects you, who you trade with, and what direction your nation takes. France's military bases, often established without full parliamentary debate, have been seen as tools for surveillance and manipulation, not protection. IMF and World Bank loans, often tied to painful austerity conditions, have shackled African nations in debt cycles that stifle development. Support for leaders like Ibrahim Traoré isn't about glorifying authoritarianism. It's about reclaiming sovereignty and rejecting systems that only benefit foreign powers. 3. Because Africa must speak with one voice to be respected. Divided, Africa is weak. United, it is unstoppable. ECOWAS' recent crisis, where it threatened military intervention against fellow African nations, Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, shows how external pressure can divide the continent. The African Union, while a good idea on paper, is often undermined by external lobbying, foreign funding, and national self-interest. If Africans support a Pan-African awakening, then leaders across the continent will have the moral courage and political backing to exit exploitative agreements, form stronger regional alliances, like the alliance of Sahel states, coordinate defense, economy, and diplomacy across borders. Only then will Africa stop being a chessboard for global powers and start playing the game on its own terms. 4. Because African youth are the continent's greatest weapon and hope. With over 60% of the population under the age of 25, Africa has the youngest population in the world. Yet, youth unemployment, migration, and disenfranchisement plague the continent. Why should African youth flee across the Mediterranean to wash dishes in Europe when their lands are rich, their minds sharp, and their potential unmatched? Why are African schools teaching more about Napoleon and Shakespeare than about Mansa Musa, Nkrumah, or Sankara? A new Africa must mean a new education system, new industries, new leaders, and youth at the center of the revolution. This is not just a political battle. It's a cultural, spiritual, and psychological war for identity, pride, and future. 5. Because Africa deserves to be great on its own terms. Africa has the natural resources to power the green energy revolution, the arable land to feed the world, the culture and diversity to inspire global civilization. What it has lacked is unified leadership, courage to break chains, and mass consciousness. When Africans support leaders and movements that challenge the status quo, whether in Burkina Faso or anywhere else, they are investing in their own future. A future where children no longer die of curable diseases, where roads and railways connect African capitals instead of pipelines to Europe, where military uniforms protect the people, not foreign companies, where African passports are powerful and African culture shapes global trends. This is the moment, and all Africans must choose. Support the awakening or watch the chains tighten. This is why Africans must support the movement, not just Traoré or Burkina Faso, but the ideology of dignity, self-reliance, and unity. Africa can be great again, but only if its people believe, unite, and act.